So glad you could make it, Jamie. We weren't sure you could, and I'm delightful to see you. And I'm really impressed with the Whitney show. I think it's really good. We can talk about that.
Good.
And welcome very much to Manhattan Network and Public Access. It's a great pleasure welcoming you. And in the audience, welcome very much to Conversation. We're having a conversation today with two people that were directly in touch with Buckminster Fuller, that being his wife, Allegra, or his daughter. I'm sorry. His daughter Allegra and his grandson Jamie Snyder, and of the eminent polymath. And as I said to them off camera as we got started, in my humble opinion, I've thought a lot, read a lot, but I think it might very well be a candidate for the most important human being in the history of humanity, that being our Buckminster Fuller. And they've just been in New York to celebrate an opening of a major event at the Whitney Museum, a celebration of the man and his vision. And welcome to you both very, very much indeed.
Thank you
very much.
Great pleasure to welcome you. And perhaps, Allegra, you could begin. You said you were born and raised in New York, and you were obviously with your dad. Maybe you could set it up a little bit. You're coming into this world and in the presence of such a person. Well, I was
actually born in Chicago.
Okay.
And then we moved back east when I guess I was about 3.5. And but most of my schooling was in New York City.
Dalton School?
Dalton School, yes.
Good school, I understand, yeah.
It is a good school. And then we moved down to Washington, D.C. The last 2 years of the war, my father was connected with the Board of Economic Warfare.
I see.
And then the opportunity to develop the Wichita House came.
Yes, indeed.
And he went off to Wichita, and my mother and I came back to New York again because I, at that point, had graduated school and started the beginning of my career in the field of dance.
Yeah, I see. You had been very involved in dance. And you were here in New York on the Upper East Side part of New York, as I understand.
On 88th Street,
You like New York?
I love New York,
Did you like New York when you were growing up and so forth? Do you remember?
I did.
Can you remember your father's feelings about New York? He was here, and he was such a brilliant fellow, but we're here in New York television, so we're wondering how did he like New York?
I think he felt very at home here.
Okay.
He had many friends here, and many important life experiences here. His sort of first audience for listening to his thoughts and ideas was at a gathering place down in Greenwich Village, Romney Marie's.
Yes.
And it was there that so many people, but certainly very particularly his dear friend Isamu. He met Isamu Noguchi, but he used to. It was the first. He was still sort of talking a lot about his first concept of the Dymaxion suspended house, and he would have that model. Set up that model on a table. Romney Marie allowed him to do that, and he would just hold forth. And a lot of people were exposed to his thinking then, but he was also made very deep friends with many people at that point in time. I think he felt very at home in New York.
Yeah, in Greenwich Village with the artistic community and intellectual. He was an intellectual of the highest order and so forth. Yeah. That was really good. And he was here, and he had that camaraderie with people. He had some trouble at Harvard University for some reason. For hijinks or something, I think. He had been at Harvard.
I don't know. For some reason, he was a very lively young man, and became quite enchanted with the Marilyn Miller.
Marilyn Miller, the great dancer.
Yes, right. And the story goes, I think this part at least is true. His sister went away and asked if he would take care of her Russian wolfhound. and he said he would. And he discovered that if he brought the Russian wolfhound to the stage door of Marilyn Miller's performances in Boston, that every one of the girls would come out and say, "Oh, what a beautiful dog!" And he got quite. So then they moved. The show went down to New York, and he decided we'd go to New York and take them all out to dinner.
Yes.
And that happened to cost him all of his allowance for and tuition for Harvard that year.
Isn't it lovely? Yeah.
Harvard suggested that wasn't the proper way for Also, I actually suspect that my grandmother was involved with that too, and it was sort of a punishment for him. But interestingly enough, so they sent him off to get serious and to work in a mill in Canada, and he was so excited because he was working with machinery and actually got so involved with it that he made quite a few levels of improvement on the machinery. He loved working with these people who worked with their hands and really in a direct experience of things. So it was nothing but a positive and wonderful experience. And I think he was a little disappointed when Harvard said he could come back.
And when
then they said that he didn't that he was thrown out again. My remembrance of this is that his class of Harvard was 1917.
Okay,
that happened to be the year of us entering the war.
Yes, of course, yeah.
All of his classmates, as well as he, enrolled in he
went to Naval Reserve.
He went into the Navy. And so my understanding of the fact that he didn't actually finally get a degree was not to say that he was a total failure at Harvard.
No, not at all.
No.
And it was very interesting because he was born in 1895, and then when finally he became so illustrious and got honorary degrees upon honorary degrees, and they gave him one at Harvard, as I understand.
That's correct.
And they called him back, and they didn't know what to give him the degree in because he was a comprehensivist. So I think, if I'm not mistaken, they ended up giving it to him in poetics.
Well, he was actually, Jamie, check me out, Norton.
Charles Eliot Norton.
Charles Eliot Norton.
Poetry,
yeah.
So when all else fails, you can give it to him in poetry because he was interested in everything. He was a delightful person. And you got these, you got his expressions back then. They got some footage there at the Whitney of him, and he was talking about that, what they called 4D lock or something, or that whole house, and he was so bright and so clever. He had a little statement about Mr. Euclid notwithstanding or something. He was so clever and he was so smart.
That's
I mean, just absolutely
fun
sterling.
Footage, though, because it's also, he is, I love that because you still see him being, well, you say he's had a few good quips. He also, you see him there as a sort of still a little bit of a hesitant young man at that point.
Oh yeah, but he was delightful, and he was so bright and everything. He was very bright, and you were living with him, and when you were being raised with him, he had a propensity to be able to talk at some length. He would give talks that would go on for hours, and it was all good. And people would say, where in the heck is the declarative sentence? Because he was connecting so many different things in a large comprehensive context. It must have been interesting, let's say, around the dinner table.
Well, it was interesting around the dinner table for a very different reason.
Okay.
Because he also, as you know, felt very strongly about children, that children were really comprehensivists.
Good for him.
And that it was, we were all children were born geniuses. And unfortunately, he felt that the educational system was what de-geniused them to a large extent, because what education tended to do was, as a part of the child's vision, is the sense of the comprehensive.
Okay.
And
that's very important.
When you get to school, you say, no, you're studying mathematics today. No, no, this is, you pay attention to this.
It's 4:15. You got to go do this.
That's right.
Bells ringing.
And a child's imagination goes everywhere.
Absolutely.
All the time. So I was lucky, because he appreciated me for who I was.
Yeah.
And
could I ask you, I don't mean to pry or anything like that, but what year were you born?
1927.
27. So he would have been 32 then,
right,
when you came along.
Right.
And so he would have been about 30, about 40 when you were 5.
Right.
Is that about right?
Something.
So you were at that age that he was taking a lot of cues from you being in his life, I would think, because you're setting the pattern.
He took cues
and aren't
from
5-year-olds just absolutely fantastic? They are all so creative
I think he felt from the moment I emerged I was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, there's a tendency for people to think that way.
So coming back to saying whether he occupied the whole dinner table with his talk, not really. If I had something to say, I could say it. And I had my moments when I wanted to have something to say.
I would think, yeah. Were you precocious or not? Do you remember when you were young, or were you?
I was. I think also because of his being my father and my mother who she was.
Yes.
I wasn't precocious at all, but I certainly felt comfortable with myself.
Good. You were comfortable in your own skin, they say,
right,
and everything
right.
like that. And you were destined to go and become very involved in dance and cultural things.
And I started that part of me emerged very early.
It did.
And
gymnastics? Were you involved in a gymnastics play?
No, really dance. I mean, I talk a lot about dance as a way of knowing, and that's that's where I started, really.
I see.
So I learned to do, or had experiences with doing movement that was actually another way of absorbing and communicating ideas.
Yeah, Marshall McLuhan used to talk about body percept and body perceptive communication. A lot of communication isn't just either verbal. It's a lot of body percept and that kind of thing. And a lot of communication takes place at that level.
I actually can watch the television quite well without ever putting the sound up.
Oh, really? Yeah? You do that?
Yeah, I do.
Just have the image there and you don't have the sound?
Because there is so much communication in our bodies.
Okay. I see what you mean. Yeah, you'd be particularly appreciative of that then, yeah. And then you're also been involved in cross-cultural things.
Right.
You're involved at the university, I know,
UCLA. I was at UCLA for many years.
In cultural and dance, right?
Well, I was chair of the Department of Dance and developed a program there called World Arts and Cultures Program.
Very good. It's going well still? It's going along?
It's going well.
And we hadn't mentioned at the beginning, it might have been the graphic, but you're the chair of the Buckminster Fuller Institute. Well,
the chair actually is an honorary position on the board. I was president to begin with, and I have sat on the board all of these years. But
distinguished board of people that are really interested in this amazing man.
Yeah.
And what about you, Jamie, if you could pitch in here a little bit? When do you first have recollection of this fantastic granddad of yours? And did you see him in any kind of a special light, or was he just granddad like we all see? Or what's your remembrance, if you could?
Well, I have a lot of, he was alive for 28 years of my life, and we had a close-knit family.
Okay.
My sister and I, his only grandkids, and he was very much a family person, so he came around a lot, and given that he traveled a lot, he would come through Los Angeles where we were living often, and so I had a pretty close relationship and certainly loved him very dearly as young boys loved their grandfathers,
right.
and I got more and more interested. I mean, we just had many common interests, and we spent summers up in Maine and on the waters up in the coastal Maine, and he taught me how to sail and seamanship and these kinds of things, which are pretty important experiences for him as they were for me. I think I want to just sort of shift gears for one second and mention you started the program with a very generous comment about Bucky and your own feeling that he may be most important human being in history or something. And I just want to say that I think Bucky might say that there isn't any part of the universe that's more important than another part of the universe. There's no human being that's more important than another human being. There's no part of this total universe in which we are that's any more important than anything else. So I just wanted to say that and for our audience, because it's easy to, I mean, it's fun for those of us who are familiar with Buckminster Fuller to appreciate the many gifts that he has, and we've all learned a lot from him. Obviously, we wouldn't be sitting here talking, but at the same time, I want to expand the discussion for those of our audience who may never have heard of Buckminster Fuller or heard a little bit, seen the Whitney Show, whatever it might be, and kind of be inclusive here to introduce what's important and relevant about what we each found was important and relevant about what he had to say and did that we think is relevant to today, and the challenges that are facing society today, because we certainly have some big challenges. And if there's any one thing that was a central theme to Bucky's life work was how do we make the world work for 100% of humanity, and that couldn't be more relevant to today.
Very, very well said. He was very much a democratic inclined person. The Balinese, I don't know if you've ever seen it. The Balinese have a saying. They say, if you're going to try
we have no art.
Yeah, we have no art. We do everything as well as possible, which is a good thing. And he was very inclusive and very democratically inclusive, very generous of spirit in terms of everybody.
I mean, I think it's important what Jamie
absolutely.
Is saying,
well said, Jamie.
Which is that he wasn't generous. He felt he was a very average, ordinary man.
Yeah, he used to say that. Yeah.
He said that many times. And what he was saying, he made enormous demands on himself, but he says that everyone could do exactly the way it would evolve would be enormously different. Each one of us would see the problems out there that we were capable of really assisting in solving, but that we each have it within ourselves to be as extraordinary. If we only are really willing to commit ourselves.
If we all do as well as we can, what we're doing.
That's it.
That's a very interesting thing. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever run into it or not, but do you happen to know or come across how many cells there are in the human organism?
Jamie, perhaps
would you happen to make a guess at that? I just get it from the New York Times and that sort of thing, but it's been re-established. It's staggering. Something on the order, not the life cycle, but the cells. It's something on the order of 100 trillion cells. You got epidermal cells, you got bone cells, you got brain cells, and they're all overlaid with DNA, a design template, right? And every cell matters. Do you understand? It's a staggering thing. Sometimes I wake up, I'm wondering that anything exists is just some sort of a miracle. But that's a lesson in that every cell matters. And I don't know, it's dangerous, biological metaphors with humanity and so forth. But we have so many people that are not able to participate very maximally in terms of what their potential might be if a mother's wondering which of her 2 children are going to starve to death by Tuesday, they can't participate very well and so forth. You know what I mean? And he's saying we have to have it available for 100% of humanity.
Absolutely.
Without ecological damage. His mission statement is really important, and it is significant that democratic feel for the whole of the human society and the ecology was part of what motivated him, was it not? Mm-hmm. He's a very true Democrat in the best sense of the word.
Well, he was apolitical, so let's just, in the sense that I don't think he felt just, so I appreciate that you're using the word, in this case, Democrat with a lowercase d. I think he was a very egalitarian.
Yes, that's
I think
what I
he
meant.
was a person who, and I think it may be relevant for your readers, you know, for all of us to really think about a comment that he made, that everybody is born a genius, and that that's our natural condition, is genius.
That's amazing, yeah.
And that unfortunately, for many, the educational system by and large, and the pressures of society and the customs and habits of society, you know, de-genius people in effect.
Is that a term that's in the dictionary?
Probably not.
I told a friend, I did a program here earlier today with one of your colleagues, and I tried to do a comprehensivist in the thing, and it didn't come up in the spell check. Although it's a perfect term, you know. But
many Bucky words. He was very
inventive.
Well, no, he was extraordinarily careful about his words, and if a word he would actually re-examine each word he used all the time, and if a word didn't work, then he found the way to make it work.
And invent a new one, and then they got to catch up with the spell checks on our computers, because he's bringing, some ginger and spice to the English language. Also, very, very, a great deal of economy of language, poetic economy of language. He includes so much in so many of the things that he writes, but it's also very inclusive with a lot of what a lot of people see as run-on sentences, when really it's just in being much more inclusive in a comprehensive way, the thing he's talking about. It seems to me it's like poetic, yeah.
You know, I did an interview, done a few interviews here in New York, and recently, and I also recently, the past few months, I've been involved in preparing for republication, a few of Bucky's most important books.
Good.
One, his book, Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth.
Isn't that a great title?
And another, Utopia or Oblivion, and both very insightful and important comments, just the titles themselves. And one of the things that I mentioned in these interviews and in the introduction to these books, is that going to be okay with that sound?
Yeah, it's okay. The lavaliers won't pick it up. I'm sorry.
See.
It's just an open studio problem. But
no problem.
Try to talk over it.
But in any event, I remember not long before he passed on, I was, while I was going to music school, I was living in a house with my grandmother and him. He'd orbit in and out from his lecture tours around the world. And I remember going to the airport one day, taking him down to LAX, driving in the car, about a half-hour drive, and as soon as we got in the car, out on the road, he said, "Jamie, we've got about a half hour now. What's the most important thing we should be thinking about?" And I think that's a really relevant question. I don't remember what we said in that particular moment. I suspect it had something to do, I mean, Bucky was always putting everything in the context of the universe and the world, and what is really important to be thinking about. And so I guess I think that's an important for us. We live in very critical times.
We do indeed.
We have the privilege right now to be speaking, to be recorded. Perhaps there'll be some people listening to this tape, listening to what we have to say. And I think we live in critical times. The planet, it's unbelievable to me, but I feel that it seems to be emerging as extremely clear that humanity, the survival of humanity and nature and the ecosystem as we know it is, if we don't make some dramatic changes in the way that we are living our lives and conducting ourselves as societies, we may destroy the whole ecological balance to a point where we will have no control and no ability to bring it back to the kind of conditions that we've been used to counting on. Mm-hmm. And I think that Bucky was a person who lived his life as if every moment counted in the sense of it, that we could make a difference, that what we did or didn't do might just tip the balance in terms of the success of our planet, the success of our society versus the destruction of our society. So I think that's, I would suggest that for the rest of our lives, mm-hmm. not just this TV show and the remaining time we have together, that we need to keep coming back and asking ourselves, what is the most important thing we can be thinking about? What is it that's relevant, perhaps in the context of this program? What's relevant about, what did we learn from Bucky? What is it that he perhaps suggested, or what are some of the principles that he was pointing to that our viewers can reflect upon, utilize, that might assist them in being effective in joining with, how should I say, in addressing this critical problem that is these challenges that are facing our society today, that the remarkable challenges, especially with regard to global warming, but you can't even, there's so many other facets of the scope of the challenges before us that we really are. It really is utopia or oblivion. And to think that, within a decade, the conditions may get out of hand. They're already. I'm from California, and as we speak, I gather people are telling me there's something like 800 forest fires.
They started with lightning. A lot of them this time. This one, yeah.
But clearly, I was there not long ago, and clearly the weather patterns are changing already. And to think that these kinds of changes are going to be more and more commonplace is a very serious subject that comes to bear on all of us. And so anyway, I guess I just
That's all, again, very, very well said, very well said. And if I may, just a couple of things came to my mind as you said it, because you were close to him, and you were obviously close to him growing up, and I was not, but I've read a great deal of what he's written, and he had a certain kind of mindset. And there were times when he said he was apolitical. I heard you say apolitical. And that was interesting to me that he did that, because he was at a level of design, and we could, for the audience, maybe we could say, he used the term anticipatory design science. We can design, and through the elegance of design, and through this term, another term he had, ephemeralization, doing more with less. Do it with elegance of design. It may be a way in which we can stave off ecological raping of the planet, as we've done out of history and so forth, through the elegance of design. Very encouraged by the fact that we're moving toward carbon 60. Buckminster fullerene is going to become the basis of our information technology and so forth. It's going to be beyond the silicon chip. There's all of these advantages, but it does also seem to me, where he's talking about design, is very important, and that we have that. But he also did, when you got down to it, I don't know if it was a little later when it was, but he wrote books like Critical Path, and he wrote Grunch of Giants. And in that, he did take to task a great deal of the political people that are running the world in a very real sense. I think I've heard in some places where he said the comprehensivist sea masters who run the world think comprehensively about everything. And in education automation, he said he thought they consciously set up graduate schools in order to get the best minds coming up so specialized out on a particular subject, the use of the pluperfect tense in 13th century poetry in the south of France or something, some subject, and not think comprehensively about things and become a threat to the people who are running the world, investment bankers by and large now, hedge fund people, political representatives and so forth, that don't have a vision or a operating manual for spaceship Earth that the future requires, and that there was a political dimension that came into his thinking at that level in terms of the real world of capitalism, finance, and that kind of thing. I wonder if you can address that, whether he had a sense of urgency for there to be something new coming out that the future might require, that are muddling along with the historical patterns, and what changes may have happened, for want of a better term, in the zeitgeist that might make possible something other than just a exchange of weaponry, which has been so much the part of human society. When that weaponry now becomes species lethal, I don't think you can see species lethality within the global warming pattern. There will be survival. But in the weaponry pattern, that is something that this little movie that's out now, WALL-E, the weapons now exist to where if they were to be unleashed, it would apparently, from all the modeling, be there would not be a single human being survive. That's not going to be the case from global warming. They might survive otherwise. But that is a reality that became real about 1970, and it was about 1970 with his world game, what was to become world game, and his reckoning of resources, when there became, in his reckoning and projection, more haves and have-nots. For the first time in 200,000 years of human existence, we crossed that line in his reckoning around the year 1970. He lived out his life thinking that. Did he ever reflect to you on that big, large issue that we may have actually, in terms of a design capability, and a capability, we have a capability to destroy the species, but we also have a capability that would make it possible for us in a pattern-like kind of way, the same way we went from Galileo being geocentric to a heliocentric world, a huge transformation, that we actually are descending, humanity is actually transcending material scarcity as an ontologic reality within which all of our institutions could be reformulated in terms of a qualitative transformation in the evolution, maybe even of universal consciousness or something. Do you know what I'm talking about, and do you make
Somewhat.
some sense out of it? And why don't we hear that, if that is the case?
I want to be very bad and not shift the subject, because you're onto something very big, but I want, because I think to understand my father and how this can be meaningful to all of the people that are listening, because we're talking about very, very big pictures. Yes. And there is a tendency to say, oh gosh, there's so many, you know, and almost to, now I'm going to be my, feel, I'm helpless.
You don't want to.
It's hopeless for me. So that's all very interesting, and what you've just said is fascinating, and I think I even understand the ideas. But what can I do?
Yeah.
First of all, to say that my father was himself a very disciplined person. And I mean, every second he really knew what he was doing and why. While you were talking, I pulled my bag forward because I have in my purse now a bag, and each time I go into a store and they're just about to take a paper bag out and put it, I say, no.
You got your little bag?
I have a bag, and so probably in a day, I have saved maybe 15 or 20 bags. Now that may seem to be incredibly, stupidly small, but what I'm saying is that each one of us can do these very, very small things that add up to the very, very big things. So that the individual must feel absolutely responsible and effective
within their everyday life pattern.
Within whatever it is.
Oh, I see. That's very important. Yeah.
I'll tell you another, probably a very embarrassingly silly story, but.
Embarrass away.
My father said, my father, who traveled on airplanes all the time,
over the place,
he said he always left that bathroom neater than when he came in.
Well done.
And so when he'd go in and he would wipe the now, isn't that a silly? Isn't that a silly thing for a big grown-up man?
No,
it isn't.
It's a great lesson.
It's
or you could say an environment. You could say an environment too. You could leave an environment or a condition or a human encounter. You might use the same metaphor, maybe better than when you found it. Maybe.
I'm just looking over there. There's a piece of.
Should we get it or should we stay on the set?
Well,
what should we do? Should we go up and pick it up?
Yeah, you could pick it up. Go and pick it up. But the point is, these absolutely big ideas start from these very, very small efforts on everybody's part.
That's very easy.
And what then, if you're making these small efforts, that begins to free yourself to be able to say, oh, well, the everyday thing isn't so. Let me see, what was that problem that I really, how can I now make the next step to respond to that? Now I need to go out to educate myself about this.
Okay.
I need to. Again, yesterday at the Center for Architecture, where they're having, as you know, a lot of meetings, and we were in the library.
Right.
With a collection of books that are, and somebody said, but did he read just the classics or something or other? And again, no, he read those books that he knew had critical ideas and information for me, so they're extremely eclectic.
You mean he read for himself, or are you reading to you, are you talking about?
Well, no, he read them for himself.
Yeah, okay,
and sometimes he'd read them to me, or some, I mean, but no, he was a very deep reader. I wouldn't. He didn't have on his bookshelf just random books. They were all there because there was something in that book, and it might be astrology or astronomy or
how did he arrange the books? Can you remember how he arranged the books? Did he have them? I had a friend of mine who wrote a book called The Word Menu, where he took reality, put a grid on it, and then he broke it all down. And we have the Dewey Decimals. We have a way of putting a grid on reality, our librarians and so forth. How did he arrange his books or his sources?
I think almost
Chronophile. He had a thing called
almost always by name, because that was the one specific. He did not want to categorize them, because remember, he didn't want specialization.
No, he wanted pattern recognition. Maybe is that fair to say? Do you think?
Well, that's certainly a part of it.
So, but would he have astronomy over here, and then he'd have history here, or do you remember? Maybe you don't remember.
No, you're not listening to what I'm saying.
I'm sorry. Yeah,
because he wouldn't have astronomy and he wouldn't have history, because he feels astronomy and history are related together.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
So, I think but the thing that the one thing that is legitimate about a book is that somebody sharing their thinking and idea, and that person may be called Archimedes. Okay, so it's Archimedes. Archimedes speaking to Buckminster Fuller.
Right. Okay. Good. So that's a way to put a grid on reality by people, by names.
That's right.
Okay, that's very interesting.
I think he felt that. I mean, I keep coming back to here and now.
Yeah.
The planet is in a crisis. And what are we going to do about it? Are we going to? I think Bucky suggested that one of the biggest things that we're up against as a society is that we're extremely nearsighted. We're myopic. We're all so focused, on the details and little things, and our educational system gets us thinking about pieces and distractions and all these things that are irrelevant and unimportant, that we're all asleep at the switch. Our society, and I would add to the list of myopia, amnesia, denial. We're running around for the most part living our lives as if there was, our survival was assured. Those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to have food and energy and shelter, which is...
About 20% of the world, I think, maybe?
No, much larger than that.
Much larger. What percentage of the world do you think has it within the context now?
The most recent figures about poverty in 2000, again, these are the big things that most of us are unaware about. In 2001, of the 6.5 billion people, 1 billion people are in extreme poverty.
Wow. Okay.
That means living on, from a monetary point of view, less than $1 a day.
Yeah.
And they're not making it.
Yeah.
They're not making it.
And the trends are bad there?
No, the trends are actually, well, and I have to say this all with a footnote because right now, with the, we're just at a point where you're seeing some terrible things going on where arable land is being used to grow fuels in ways that is not very efficient, which is then putting pressures on food, and food prices are going up. So some of these trends we may run the risk of reversing some of these trends. But in 1981, there were 1.5 billion people who were in extreme poverty. So it's down to 1. And in 1981, there was only 4 billion people, 4.5 billion people. And in 2001, there's 6.5. So the percentage of humanity in those 20 years who was living on $1 a day and not making it dropped. Now, the next largest group of people, again, these are in global development terms, they call in moderate poverty, which is people who are living on $1 to $2 a day. Their, life is hard, but their basic needs are met in the sense that they have food. It's risky. They don't always know that they can count on it, but they have food, they have shelter, they have their very basic needs. So they're just making it, but just barely. And there are 1.5, in 2001, the estimates were that there are 1.5 billion people in moderate poverty.
So that's 2.5 billion.
Right, so okay. So
out of 6, that's 4 billion that are doing okay?
4 billion people are doing better than that. Now, the largest group of people, using, again, the development terms, 2.5 billion people were what they call middle income people. Now, this is not middle income in the way we think of it in the United States, but on a global basis, middle income means that not only are their basic needs being met, but they have a little bit to put away. Maybe they can get a motor scooter or a cell phone, a little bit, start their own little business, whatever it might be. But they're on the economic ladder as people in even moderate poverty have begun to be on the economic ladder. And so the final group, then there's 1 billion people who are wealthy in the sense, the people who are like ourselves. In the global sense, we are living like kings. And so I come back to what does this have to do with us and today and the challenges we face? Well, I just think that it is so, one of the most prevalent and dangerous thoughts I think out there is the idea that we as individuals don't make any difference. We can't do anything about it.
Yeah, right, exactly. You got to guard against that, or you want to.
Because, and if there's any one thing that I think we need to affirm as 3 human beings sitting here, it's that the choices, the things that we do, Allegra with her bag, we're making choices as I think I was discussing with somebody the other day and it came up, I found myself thinking, you know, every choice we make in our lives, day by day, there are many decisions and choices we make in our lives. We're voting in our own way. Are we voting by watching TV, people killing each other? Well, that's a kind of a vote.
A lot of that on there, isn't
because there's demographics, and they know that people then like it, and we think, gee, it doesn't really matter, does it? And because again, this prevalent thought, it doesn't matter what we do because the world's going to heck, and leave it to the politicians, even though we believe that the politicians aren't doing things in our interest, but we'll default to them anyway because we can't figure out, we don't believe we can do anything about it.
Yeah, you're a filmmaker, right? Or you do filmmaking with a lot of different things. And one of the things about a problem with television is you only got an hour. And we could talk for hours, easily.
Sure.
Bucky knew how to do that well, didn't he?
Yes,
so you got a little clip, okay?
Yes.
And it's with about him, the man we're talking about?
It's some...
And we want to fit that in,
yeah, let's
right?
do that. This would be perfect time.
Okay.
This is a, this was recorded in the approximately 1971 at the University of Detroit. Here Bucky is talking to a group of architectural students, and I think talking about, you know, sort of what we're talking about and the importance of getting architectural students to reorient themselves to really thinking about what's important and what are the problems that need to be solved.
One little addendum quickly, if I may, for whatever it's worth. 1970 would have been 1 year after the day, or the year that he assumed from a comprehensive perspective that there were after that, in terms of our capability, more haves and have-nots for the first time in human history. A major premise that he advanced in 1970. So it was about that time. Magic 1970
You'll hear him actually mention that.
was an incredibly significant moment in the evolution of universal consciousness. So we're running it. We're with Jamie Snyder and Allegra Fuller Snyder, and let's run that piece of video footage now. I guess it's about 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes. If we can run that now, then please, Willie. That's it.
Are we gonna? That's it. We got 10 minutes. Are we gonna hear the audio?
Yeah, it keeps going.
The picture is of all humanity now going through a transition so unprecedented, so unexpected as to be really very difficult to comprehend. And it's not just like going through the looking glass where you get a reverse pattern of yesterday. I can tell you that there are approximately at all times now 66 million babies in the wombs of their mothers. So 66 million is a very large number. See, it would be in the size of the nations, it would be a 10th largest nation in the world. I think all of humanity is coming out of a sort of a group womb of permitted ignorance of man, permitted ignorance, which is not a statement derogatory to man, but simply because it is the nature of the total process of regenerating life on earth that the new life as born is born absolutely helpless and completely uninformed, though it has beautiful equipment, and being absolutely uninformed, it is very ignorant. That's what the word means. And even when I was young, humanity was 90% illiterate, and we've gone suddenly to almost complete 90% literacy, so that anywhere I go around the world, people have good vocabularies, and those good vocabularies got proliferated by the radio, getting into the homes and not through schools. And the television even more so, where they could correlate the words and the vision to see the objects, so that we have communication capability all of a sudden. But gradually discovering we do have this intellectual ability to acquire information and finding there are very reliable behaviors out of the physical universe which can be employed. Democracy certainly couldn't work so long as you really have an illiterate group who don't really know what's going on, and leaving it to a power structure which has all the intelligence information, makes decisions without people really knowing why. So I say we're coming to this absolute new moment when it could be that a phenomenon of democracy really might work. there are logical things that can be and should be done for all of humanity, which a democracy might really see very spontaneous, and that's what you just do. Now, with the information proliferation that is going on around the world, this could become a possibility. And I think that is the moment we are really coming into. You're going to have to find out what needs to be done. How do you organize yourself to accommodate going from 1% of humanity to 99% of humanity who are now going to have to live and double or triple their lifespans, really give them a chance to enjoy the earth. And that is the design responsibility. So when you hear everybody out here talking about ecology and so forth, it's because the architects are not doing anything. If they could sit around and draw some pictures, I feel if I get pretty, that's enough. You don't ever have to worry about beauty or pretty, because if you really understand your problem, if you solve it correctly, so life really goes on. This is regeneration of life, and you do it most economically. So economically it is realizable. It always comes out beautiful. That's why a rose is beautiful. It is just one of those parts of the great regenerative process where there is an a priori design of the universe that had the universe working. If you want to be in part of that, you can't miss beauty. That part of your joy will be there. Your joy will be just as much as it is with a beautiful sunset.
What a beautiful man. What a beautiful guy. He's just wonderful. I'm telling you. He just inspires the daylights out of me. I think he is really very, I don't know who else was able to put it together more adequately than he, even though he was humble and all that sort of thing, but he's just beautiful. What a wonderful lineage you people have, if I may say so. I'm sorry, I'm just overwhelmingly impressed with the beauty of the man and the wonder. And I do wonder about this, if I may, that I'm a little bit, I used to teach and that sort of thing, and I'm interested in these things, and I'm a little bit upset that far too many people, in my estimation, particularly the young people, are not aware of Buckminster Fuller. I think it's a shame that more people are not aware. It's wonderful that they are. If you look back upon the spirit of that time around, he was talking 1970 or so, I would venture to say at that time the whole world would have recognized him as perhaps representing the positive life force that era represented more than any other single human being on the planet. In a comprehensive way, he was more recognized than your gurus from India. All of these people, there was a thing in the air, there was something blowing in the wind, and Buckminster Fuller epitomized that more than any other single people. And the kids don't seem to know that now, and they should pick up on him in spades, in my estimation.
But he was most effective at the time when he was really working with students. Yeah. Because it was the direct hands-on experience, and I think what is the challenge for us now is to put out various ways of not talking about Bucky, but giving the new generation various kinds of experiences where they themselves will be involved with the feel and the concepts of things. I'm hoping that something like the Whitney may provoke some new people to, but many of the people involved with the Institute keep saying to us, it's so puzzling to us that the schools won't teach anything about Bucky. And maybe there will be doors opening up again for
I would hope so. And one wonders why they're not. If you go here, you ask the young people or something, they remember Mick Jagger, or they remember Bob Dylan, maybe, but they don't remember Fuller. Fuller was I'm sorry, he was humble, he was democratic in that best sense of the word, egalitarian, all of that, but he was also a monumentally important figure in terms of collectively and with economy of language putting together an understanding that is worthy of consideration by all our intellectual capability as well as our perceptual capability. And I think what we're going to is, like, again, back to that idea, if you were to take his whole experience and what he's presenting in a pattern way, Norbert Wiener said, when you have information overload, you go to pattern recognition. You can see patterns. And he was a pattern recognition people. And what is it that he would have had? And it seems to me his major contribution is the fact that he was coming to the point where we were, if I don't know how you say it, we were transcending material scarcity.
I think
as the major premise. That's like when you talk about Galileo and Copernicus, you don't talk about orbit pathways of Jupiter and all the details of what was that. What they did is we were going from a paradigm, a geocentric view of the world where everybody's identity was wrapped up in it, to a heliocentric. That was the big pattern. Here we're transcending scarcity, which is applied for 200,000 years of our existence on the planet, and it's shifted, and that's the major premise that he presents, and it's never mentioned by intellectuals or others.
Hold on a second.
And yet it would set up a paradigm that would challenge all of our institutions and hit society upside the head like you have to hit a burro, rather than talking about the details. I'm just saying, what do you say?
I think Bucky said a few days before he passed on in his last lecture, people said, asked him, what do you want to be remembered for? He said, I don't care about me being remembered. I don't want people to remember me. I'm interested in the principles that I've been teaching. I'm interested in people studying the information that I've been able to put forward and get the advantage of it. I don't care about them remembering me doing it. So that's number one.
But that
number two, I think we
don't
don't really have information. It's not really relevant, whether people know of Bucky or don't. With regard to poverty, I think that I would say something different from you. People today, there's a tremendous, I would agree with your insight that one of the fundamental insights that he presented was that for the first time in history, we've learned to do so much with so little in terms of resources and
ecologically,
so that we, for the first time in history, have the potential to sustain 100% of humanity in a way that's ecologically sustainable while phasing out the use of fossil fuels and nuclear energy.
Well, okay.
So
that's very elegant.
That's very central.
Yeah, mission statement.
And I think it is important to realize that there's a very large global consensus now. There's a very large coalition of people around the world who now understand that we can end poverty on this planet. Now they may talk about it slightly different way. They're talking about those people that are in extreme poverty and taking the next step of moving them out of extreme poverty. That's possible. There's a broad coalition to do so, and in the end, like all these issues, it comes down to, do we care about this issue enough in our day-to-day lives to put attention on it, call our elected representatives, get out there, do something about it to make these things happen? Because time and again, the only reason the politicians respond is when enough citizens say, this is important to me.
Well, between us all, I'm sorry we're running out of time. It's a heck of a thing. You don't have enough time. We could talk for hours, but I hope public access helps